Yeah. Yeah, she disappeared from my thing. Go ahead, Cheryl. Let me do that. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm here.
Everybody, gonna hold off for another minute or two. We still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people to join.
There's Amelia C. I think it's everybody. We need a lot, yeah. Amelia C. I think it was spring. I think both of them, the boy and the girl. I know they all have more than. I'm shading the thing. No, Alan, here, Alan, here, and I don't know. Come here, boy.
Yeah.
James Ireland's here. Upgrading now. Is he right here? Oh, crazy, yeah. Very good.
Okay, so it's 12:01. I am going to call this meeting of the dual use cannabis task force to order for November 14. Have roles for most people on board. I can see Dory Palkovich, Joanne Takeuchi, Isaac Choi, Jared Radula is on, Dr. James Ireland. I see Ellen Cheng, Terry Gorman, Randy Gantz, and Wendy Gibson Viviani. Garrett Hallidyer let us know that he's going to be late today. Representative Yamane is unable to attend today. So the only people that task force members that I see missing right now are Barrett Otani, Senator Joyce and Buenaventura, and Nikos Leverance. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so we have 10, we have quorum. Judge Broderick, we can start the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For those members of the public who are watching the meeting on Zoom or listening by phone, we have 2 substantive agenda items today. The first substantive agenda item is a presentation by Iris Cicada, Commissioner of Financial Institutions, Hawaii Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, on access to banking products and services for businesses and consumers, should Hawaii move toward legalized adult use. The second substantive agenda item is task force decision making on which of the working group recommendations to include in the task force report to the legislature. As it relates to public testimony, as with previous task force meetings, as testifiers, you'll have 2 minutes to provide your testimony on the agenda items. I will give you a 30-second warning and we'll call time in 2 minutes to provide everyone the opportunity to speak, while allowing adequate time for the task force members to work through the agenda. Testifiers, all testimony will only be heard before each agenda item. Even though today the task force is meeting remotely, we still will entertain in-person testimony, then online testifiers, and then phone testifiers. Let's turn to agenda item 2, a presentation by Iris Cicada, Commissioner of Financial Institutions, Hawaii Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. As I said, she's going to speak on access to banking products and services for business and consumers should Hawaii move toward legalized adult use. Is there anyone here in person who would like to testify on agenda item 2? Hearing none, the admonitions I'm about to give relate to those who are going to testify virtually. This means you wish to testify about the upcoming presentation from Commissioner Ikeda. If your testimony relates to multiple agenda items, please limit your testimony to just the agenda item we're taking testimony on at the time. So for now, that is agenda item 2, Commissioner Ikeda's upcoming presentation. Anyone online would like to submit testimony on agenda item 2? Please raise your hand. When I call your name, you will be asked to unmute. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. If you feel comfortable, please turn on your camera. We are now going to hear from Mr. Devon Ward. Mr. Ward. I know we have connection now, Mr. Ward. Mr. Ward, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you all. Can you all hear me?
Great, we can hear you very clearly. Please proceed.
Great. Thank you. Devon Ward, Marijuana Policy Project, also Honolulu resident and medical card holder here. As the task force prepares to hear from officials about banking options available for state authorized cannabis businesses, I'd ask that the task force keep in mind that the implications of last week's election on federal cannabis policy. With Democrats now believed to have retained control of the US Senate and Republicans only expected to hold a slim majority in the United States House of Representatives, there will be increased pressure and political will to adopt the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act, either before the end of the year in a lame duck session or sometime in 2023. The Safe Banking Act will protect financial institutions that service state legal marijuana businesses from being penalized by federal regulators and alleviate many of the concerns you're likely to hear today. The Safe Banking Act has passed the current Congress 7 times, most recently in July of 2022 with bipartisan support. Hawaii's congressional delegation, including re-elected Representative Case, are co-sponsors of the bill. And just last month, the NAACP passed a resolution calling for the immediate passage of the Safe Banking Act. With that in mind, and with respect to the presentation on banking, the entire landscape of cannabis banking in the United States is anticipated to change within the next few months. Separately, several states have taken independent action to address banking for cannabis-related businesses. In July of 2022, Pennsylvania passed a law adding a section entitled legitimate cannabis-related banking to the state's commerce and trade statutes, giving them broad protections to financial services. Connecticut also included, thank you. Connecticut also included similar language in their bill that was signed into law in 2021. Thank you, and available to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, sir. Task force members, any questions for Mr. Ward? Seeing none, do we have any other online testifiers?
Yes.
I'm being told we do. Tai Chen, Mr. Chen. Should be joining in just a moment. We can go to the next one and come back to Mr. Chen. The next is Alex Wong. Do we have Alex Wong connected? Task force members are trying to connect to the next testifier.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Sorry, I was as an attendee and not as a panelist. Aloha, my name is Alex Wong. I am a medical patient and caregiver currently under the 329 law. I'd like to first off mahalo this body for taking the time and developing a very strong list of what I think are productive and proper mechanisms for social equity and cannabis legalization. I think we're going in the right direction. However, I'd like to challenge this body to take a step further in terms of protecting and preserving the impending local Hawaii cannabis market by considering a prohibition and strong prejudice against allowing mainland corporate cannabis companies from getting licenses and setting up shop in the state of Hawaii. I believe that companies who are not founded and based and established and companies that are not owned and operated and employing residents who live full-time in the state of Hawaii should not be allowed to have licenses. That would be a huge detriment to state tax coffers and the people of Hawaii and the Hawaiian economy as a whole. I'd like to take it even a step further and suggest that this body consider a all-out prohibition against the importation of cannabis once cannabis goes fully legalized. I have a strong suspicion that mainland corporations will not only import their own employees to work out here, but they'll also be tempted to import cannabis grown in the mainland. And
30 seconds, Mr. Wong, 30 seconds, please.
So yeah, that would be a huge detriment to our local economy. And it's the same thing with food. The state of Hawaii is currently going against the import of 85 to 90% of all the food bought and sold in stores. The same protections and measures need to be taken in terms of cannabis cultivation and the economy and the market in the state of Hawaii. Mahalo for your time. Aloha.
Thank you very much. Task force members, any questions for Mr. Wong? Hearing none, are we connected to Tai Chen? All right, we're working on connecting. Task force members is working on bringing on Mr. Chen.
Hello, you have me down?
Yes, we can. Please proceed, Mr. Chen.
Oh, thank you so much. Sorry about that. The previous entrance caused my Zoom to crash. I had to relog on, but thank you for your time. I just wanted to first, I have written testimony. I'm just following up on that. As the president of Aloha Green, I just wanted to send my thanks to Commissioner Akeda for all her work previously with allowing CanPay as well as Partners Colorado to operate here in the state of Hawaii. Both those services have helped the medical licenses immensely by providing an outlet for cash to be banked. Although not here in Hawaii locally, we're able to have all our electronic deposits and wires sent to a bank that's operating on the mainland in Colorado. One other item I did not include in my testimony, but I wanted to share with the dual use task force is that Aloha Green has entered into a cash information sharing agreement with a local bank. This local bank is working with a mainland bank to work on creating a way for which our local cash can be deposited at local branches here in the state of Hawaii. So I just wanted to give an update on that and say that, you know, the industry is working hard on finding ways in which to get around the fact that we operate predominantly in cash. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. Task force members, any questions for Mr. Chen?
I've got a quick question.
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, Ty, just for some context, can you provide a little bit of information about how many licenses you believe are kind of using these services and how efficient they are?
Yeah, for Partners Colorado, which operates under Safe Harbor, all the licenses were offered an account at the time, about 3 years ago, when they were allowed to operate here in Hawaii. And so that has helped a lot because our federal income taxes, our federal corporate taxes, of course, are paid online or through check. And this provides an outlet for all the debit as well as ATM or ACH transactions that occur. Currently, we have a couple solutions to allow for electronic payment to be done. One is through debit. Sorry, it's echo there. One is through debit cards, and the other, of course, is through ACH, which is a direct transfer from a patient's checking account directly into the checking account of the business. And so I'd say for Aloha Green, we process about 30% of our transactions, 30 to 40% through electronic means. And that cash, of course, is banked on our mainland bank, in which we can use those funds to pay our employees. But we still are predominantly about 50, 60% cash based. But all the licensees have a solution to deal with cash. None of us, even though this is a cash business, none of the licenses operate on a 100% cash basis.
Got it. Thank you so much.
All right, do we have any other virtual testifiers? No. Do we have any phone testifiers? No phone testifiers, all right. Madam Chair, we're now ready to take up agenda item 2, a presentation by Iris Ikeda, Commissioner of Financial Institutions, Hawaii Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, on access to banking products and services for businesses and consumers should Hawaii move toward legalized adult use.
Aloha. My name is Iris Ikeda. Thank you for the introduction, Judge Broderick. I'm going to talk about the access to banking products and services for businesses and customers should Hawaii move towards legalized adult use, as he's said. I want to cover 3 areas. First, the availability of banking services now, alternatives to banking services in Hawaii, and actions needed. First of all, I'd like to just introduce what DFI is. So who is DFI? The Division of Financial Institution regulates banks and credit unions for safety and soundness and regulatory compliance for consumer protection. We also regulate other non-depository financial services products. I've been discussing with banks and credit unions about offering banking services to cannabis-related businesses for years now. I've met personally with several banks and credit unions specifically about how to offer these banking services. And on our website, I do have a presentation about how that can be done. Banking services in Hawaii right now is very limited. It's limited for related cannabis service providers like accountants, construction workers, plumbers, electricians, lawyers, etc. As if you remember at the beginning, banks were threatening or closing accounts for these related service providers. I've worked diligently with banks individually to request that they monitor these consumer accounts for federal illegal activity. And as long as the work or services being provided by the medical cannabis service providers is just one of their clients, banks have allowed for the continued banking services for these service providers. As Mr. Chen said, the governor offered a suggested mobile app and credit union for safe use by consumers and the cannabis dispensaries. To date, there are no banking services available for medical dispensaries in Hawaii. All medical dispensaries have banking services provided by an out-of-state financial institution. Why is this? Banking is a highly regulated industry. Several federal laws prohibit banks from engaging in activities with businesses deemed illegal by federal banking laws. The Controlled Substances Act is just one of those laws. The bigger one is Bank Secrecy Act or Anti-Money Laundering Act. Using the federal payment system for illegal activity is a huge violation. It also prohibits, those 2 laws also prohibit banking services for illegal activity, such as the Controlled Substances Act. And there is also personal liability and incarceration for bank staff and bank board members who allow for this activity. As we look at law enforcement, as bank regulators, including myself, have been information sharing with Congress, we were able to get a federal budget bill proviso that does not allow federal money to be allocated to prevent any state from implementing its own medical marijuana law. This means medical marijuana businesses that comply with their state law may not see interference by the Department of Justice. That has been every year we've been fighting to make sure that is included in the federal budget bill. I'm happy to say that it is in the current federal budget bill that is being discussed. How about a state banking charter? It's pretty difficult. I would say almost impossible to get a state bank charter. Hawaii laws require FDIC insurance. You need to get a master account or certificate to use the federal payment system for debit cards, ACH, or deposits into an account. And no financial institution across the nation has been granted a master account. Applications have been made, but they've all been denied. What about digital currency to facilitate payment? A couple of states allow digital currency payments for cannabis use. Crypto's inherent volatility and high transaction costs make it a poor substitute for cash. Converting the crypto payments into fiat may expose the cannabis business to capital gains tax or lose value when it comes time to cash in to pay rent or other expenses. Crypto companies, as we've seen recently, have shut down suddenly without any warning. And adult use stores are starting to use NFT services to facilitate those payments, but they have the same inherent volatility and high transaction costs. The call to action. We need action by Congress. Someone had alluded to that Congress should pass the Safe Banking Act. Hawaii, I've been information sharing with Congress for years, I think since 2015. Specifically, the Hawaii Congressional Delegation is supportive of this effort. I've been meeting with the Senate Banking Committee as it's changed from Republican to Democrat, and also the State Banking Chair staff. In conclusion, no banking services in Hawaii for medical dispensaries. Banking services are available for service providers and consumers, and action is needed in Congress to allow banking services by Hawaii banks and credit unions. Mahalo for allowing me to present this testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Ikeda, for your presentation. Task force members, questions for Ms. Ikeda or comments based on what she shared?
Aloha, Ms. Ikeda. Thank you for your presentation. And thank you for being proactive on this front within, the pretty still limited landscape we face on the federal level. My question is, if something like, if the Safe Banking Act, something like that passes and that banking and insurance and other financial services are made available under federal law, what would be the timeline for, our current dispensaries to be able to access in-state banking and insurance services? Thank you.
May I answer that question? So that's a very good question. So the timeline generally is 120 days after the act is passed for anything to be implemented, just to give the financial institutions some time to kind of gear up and get their processes in place. It could take longer, but the minimum timeline is generally 120 days.
The next question, task force member has a question, is Mr. Raduli. Mr. Raduli. And then after that, Mr. Gons.
Thank you very much. My question is state action preempted by federal action? In other words, does the federal government have to pass the Safe Banking Act first? Or is there anything that the state can do in the meantime other than support it?
So that's a good question. And, as I said, we have the federal proviso in the budget bill that we've been getting every year. Of course, it's not a permanent solution for no law enforcement interference. But even with that, our banks, because federally regulated, they are not willing to take that risk yet without some federal legislation.
Thank you.
Mr. Is that okay? Mr. Gons.
Thank you. I have two questions. How is the difference between Colorado and Hawaii, given that given that Colorado has credit unions that are that are actively providing us services as we speak? And is it difference in state law that it disallows them to work with Hawaii banks? And then also, I know North Dakota has a state chartered bank. What are the possibilities of trying to set up some entity of that sort in the state that's regulated by the state laws instead of the federal laws?
Thank you for asking. So the Colorado Credit Union, it is a state chartered credit union. In Hawaii, there are no state chartered credit unions. In fact, most of the services provided by credit unions and banks are state chartered. As to your second question for the state bank, so that was so Hawaii has a law that says that all of these banks must be insured by the FDIC. The North Dakota Bank is not insured by the FDIC. It's insured by the full faith and credit of the North Dakota government.
Any other questions for Ms. Ikeda?
Just have a follow-up. So you mentioned that Hawaii has no state chartered institutions. Is it more difficult to have state chartered institutions in Hawaii, or is it not even possible to have a state chartered institution?
So our credit unions had all decided right before I was first appointed by Governor Abercrombie to exit and go and be a national credit union only. That happened during the previous administration, where there's some movement to all go to a national charter.
Do credit unions and their boards of directors have the opportunity to make a decision not to go that way if they decided to stay within the state and be state chartered? Do they have that option?
They do, you know, which is why I've been meeting with the different credit unions to see if they want to become state chartered again.
Got it. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for clarifying. Very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Gons. Any other task force members have any questions for Ms. Ikeda? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Ikeda. We're now ready to turn to agenda item 3, task force member decision making on which of the working group recommendations to include in the task force final report to the legislature. Are there any in-person individuals who wish to testify? All right, seeing none. Oh, sir, please. Sir, just let me, please, grab a seat. Just let me read a couple things I wanted to share. 2 points of interest. The first is that this is the 3rd time as it relates to certain recommendations, and for others, the 4th time that the public has had a chance to testify on these recommendations. We want to ensure everyone that all previous testimony is on record. So in the interest of time, to avoid duplication, I respectfully ask that if you do testify today, that you refrain from repeating your previous testimony. The second point is that if you wish to testify about any recommendation, you need to do so now, because all recommendations fall under agenda item 3. Sir, state your name and proceed.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, my name is Jason Haley, and I'm the president of the Oahu Cannabis Farm Alliance.
Please proceed.
Good to go. Okay. Good morning, task force members. I'm going to try and talk smooth like the judge to see if we can pull this off. We are the Oahu Cannabis Farm Alliance. We are a local member supported alliance with our mission to engage in community members, law enforcement, and the medical cannabis users of Hawaii to build a safe and robust medical cannabis program in Hawaii. This is why I'm talking right now, because we're focusing on this medical program that we don't want to lose. Although the Medical Cannabis Act was established in the year 2000, it has gained limited support from the policymakers in Hawaii. Let's see here, sorry. Today's dispensaries provide limited services to the 37,000 medical patients across Hawaii with major issues in affordable medicine. We at Oahu Cannabis Farm Alliance recommend a cannabis policy board be formed where all voices can be heard before moving forward with cannabis policy focused on recreational cannabis. We also recommend to quickly address our medical program, and this is the starting point for any other responsible cannabis programs in the future. The quick enactment of legislation and recreational programs in all states has only made the black market more powerful and left behind the medical patients and any hope of local small businesses engaging in the cannabis industry. The effects of legalization of recreational cannabis enactment are well documented. On the recent front cover of Forbes magazine is the article "Weed versus Greed: How America Botched Legalizing Pot." Currently, there are 37,000 medical patients in Hawaii, with most people not participating in this regional card program because they just don't trust the government due to raids in backyards, NED, flying helicopters over property, and invading people's privacy. People do want to engage in the medical program. People do want to grow their own medicine for themselves. And people who can't grow for themselves want people to grow their cannabis, but they need to be able to trust law enforcement.
And your time is up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Task
you.
Force.
Thank you, Mr. Henley. Task Force members, questions for Mr. Henley? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. And we're now ready to take online testifiers. And the first one is, first of all, let me give you your instructions. Please raise your hand, and this again, we're focusing only on agenda item 3. When I call your name, you'll be asked to unmute. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. If you're comfortable, please turn on your camera. First person we have is, and I'm sorry, I've got Lisa, and then what's the correct spelling of that last name? B-L-U-M Blum. Looks like Miss Elisa Blum. Miss Blum, we'll let you know when we're connected to you.
Trying to promote. I'm not taking it. What time just happened? I'm on the top.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed. Yes. Okay.
Yes, I would like to testify for section 3 about the 500-foot buffer zone.
Yes.
Okay, aloha task force members, thank you so much for your time. My name is Elizabeth Blummer. I'm a farmer now for over 23 years. On my land here, I've worked really hard to bring it back to life. And we live next to a hemp operation in Kula. So I want to testify because for 2.5 years now, we live next to this farm. We started 2.5 years ago. And our neighborhood here, over 40 people, a textbook reason to put in the 500-foot buffer or even more to commercial hemp growers with over 20 plants. We experience every day, 24/7, the problems living next to such an operation. So for 2.5 years, at least a bit more, the problems, we tried to stop all these problems. So nobody else in the state should experience it. It's health damaging to us, the smell. I have created allergies. It's really a strong smell at certain times. I have experienced, like memory
30
problems.
seconds remaining, Ms. Blum, 30 seconds.
And well, there's a lot of problems you might know about living next to such an operation. And I'm asking you to please, for the sake of all of us and our children, please keep at least a 500-foot buffer zone to existing homes, churches, playgrounds, and schools. Please keep that in your mind. And thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Task force members, any questions from Ms. Blum?
Terry Gorman, I have
Yes,
a
Ms.
question
Blum.
for Ms. Blumel. You do realize that the task force is only talking about what's legally considered to be marijuana and not hemp. Do you understand that?
It is cannabis, yeah. And
Yes.
it's the same smell, the same for growing the plants. It's the same operation, with growing lights, with the stench coming, and we need to be protected. People who are just regular citizens.
Oh, I'm in agreement with you. I just wanted to clarify for you and for others who may be listening that the hemp program is under the authority of the Department of the Department of Agriculture and not the Department of Health. And the medical cannabis program is under the authority of the Department of Health. I 100% support what you're saying. And should the cannabis program or should the legislature decide to legalize recreational use of cannabis, I'm in full support of requiring at least 500-foot buffer from existing residences, neighborhoods, et cetera, but you do realize this body does not have jurisdiction over hemp farming, correct?
Yes, I realize that.
I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much for your
Yeah,
testimony.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Palmer? All right, hearing none, thank you. The next virtual testifier is Alicia Melnick. Ms. Melnick will try to connect with you now.
Good afternoon, I believe it is. My name is Alicia Melnick. I am an attorney in Portland, Maine, with Bernstein Sher, but I'm here today on behalf of the Maine Craft Cannabis Association and also in collaboration with the Oahu Cannabis Farm Alliance. Just want to thank you for all the work that you've done thus far and putting a lot of thoughtful consideration into the emerging medical cannabis program in your state, and just wanted to offer a couple of comments. I know you're pretty far into things, but for what it's worth, I have spent over 10 years here in Maine helping the development of our medical cannabis market. And I was also the political director for Maine's adult use campaign in 2016, which legalized cannabis for adults over 21. I just want to say that I think there's a real opportunity here for you all to establish a medical cannabis program that is able to respond to the needs of patients, both visiting and resident patients in Hawaii, while also preparing for an adult use market and eventually, in what we all believe in is in the not too distant future, a federal legalization or descheduling of these of cannabis. So allowing your market in Hawaii, including your small business owners, providers, cultivators, and others to come into the light and ensure that patients are being served with low barrier access to
30 seconds, Ms. Melnick, 30 seconds, please.
Sure thing. There's just real opportunities, and we would like to offer what we can here in Maine to ensure that this is an industry that is properly regulated and appropriately regulated so that you can, again, ensure access for patients and privacy and regulatory owners. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Task force members, any questions for Ms. Melnick?
I have a question.
All right. Please proceed.
Alyssa, can you briefly state some of the requirements and regulations of Maine licensees? All from the lower level to the upper level. What kind of regulations and requirements does the state require them to operate?
For medical providers, for registered medical providers, you have to go through a background check that ensures that you don't have a disqualifying offense. You have to.
Sorry, I'm talking about the ones that get their license, like a medical licensee or a medical cooperative, things like that. What are the regulations for them to operate under the state law? So, do they have testing standards? Do they have to, adhere to building codes? Do they have to be zoned in a certain area? Things of that nature.
Yep, a lot of the zoning requirements are established at the municipal level here, at the local level here in the state, but at the state level, we do have an oversight body that that does all of the, for example, on-site inspections to ensure that the medical providers are complying. There are different requirements for people who are retailers versus those that are cultivators, depending on their size. We do have dispensaries here in Maine, but we also have a large network of small to medium caregivers that are serving patients, and they are allowed to serve patients based on their based on their registration type. I'm happy to provide after this meeting a follow-up testimony that gives you a layout of the different levels of registration and what is required. If that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I guess where I'm trying to get to is a place where I can compare Hawaii's regulations on our current licensees, and then comparing the regulations or the lack of regulations that the other operations in Hawaii have compared to the Maine model, which I think has a pretty good regulatory oversight of their industry and all the players in it and the requirements that they have. So I can kind of, there's been a lot of comments that Maine has been a state to look forward to, and take some takeaways from. So just to get a better understanding of how they're regulating all of the activity, when currently in Hawaii, we don't have regulations on all of the activity in our cannabis space.
Yeah, I'm very happy to provide that. And again, there's been more resources put towards things like inspectors as opposed to things like required track and trace, for example. So trying to have real on the ground compliance measures that try to help the industry participants comply with public health and safety needs and still have low barriers and low costs of those regulations, so that they're not either pushed out of the market back into the illicit market, or that those costs are not passed on to patients who then are faced with very difficult decisions, as you know, about where to spend their money.
Very important. I appreciate if you can get that information over to the task force and they can disseminate that, that'd be great.
Very happy to do so.
Thank you.
Mr. Leverance, you're up now, and then Ms. Gibson Vivian.
Thank you, Judge. Aloha, Ms. Melnick, and mahalo for appearing before us today. I have a two-part question. What is the size limit for in Maine for somebody to be part of the Craft Alliance? And very briefly, what's your experience been in, craft producers in Maine, and how can government best support craft producers both in Maine, and potential lessons to be learned for smaller states like Hawaii?
So to be a caregiver in Maine, in addition to being things like 21 and having to pass the background check, you can cultivate up to 30 mature cannabis plants, up to 60 immature cannabis plants and unlimited seedlings, or up to 500 square feet of mature plant canopy and 1,000 feet of immature plant canopy and unlimited seedlings. So that is the caregiver model here. And then there are different requirements for someone who wants to have a caregiver retail store. And then we have dispensaries, which we started out with only 8 in the state, 1 in each public health district. But what we found, in my understanding, is you're experiencing some of this in your state as well, is that those dispensaries were not sufficient to serve patients here in the state. We are a large, state that's pretty rural, and the caregiver model was better able to serve patients more locally. We also, caregivers are allowed to deliver to patients. That's been a legacy of our market, and it's really been important because some patients are homebound or have difficulty getting around, and they develop that personal relationship with caregivers in that way. We've really found, again, that low barriers to access to the market and to retaining the ability to stay in the market has been hugely important for retaining diversity of products available to patients, and also local affordable access.
Quick follow-up. Does the government of Maine or any municipality in Maine provide any kind of support services or guidance for craft growers? And how do you foresee the craft cannabis landscape operating in a prospective national market where there is interstate commerce? And that's my final question.
Local municipalities, I think there's a range of how engaged they've been with their local craft cannabis producers. I would say that there has been a long history of local cultivators, manufacturers, and retailers having a really open relationship with their municipalities and with their local law enforcement. They want them to know who they are and where they are, so that there's as much transparency as possible in the market, and to ensure again that patient privacy is respected when possible. We are trying here to fend off the type of overregulation that we see, really being pushed in a lot of places. Just about every session, there's proposals for, massively increased regulatory requirements, whether it's videotaping or vaults or some things that we've fended off because we don't really see any data to support that really provides anything to patients who really are centered in our market here in our medical cannabis program. So we believe that the thousands of small and medium business owners who act as caregivers for patients in the state, if we can continue to support them operating as they have been without overregulation, and addressing the sorts of externalities like odor or parking in the way that you would any other industry, is the best way to support those folks surviving a national market.
Ms. Gibson, Vivian.
Hi, thank you, Ms. Melnick, for showing up. I just have a quick question. Do you have a caregiver to patient ratio? Ours is that's what we have. It's a 1-to-1 ratio here. But it sounds more like your caregivers are allowed to grow up to a certain number of plants and have retail stores and delivery. So do you have a patient to caregiver ratio in there or somewhere, or is that?
So I think you all are kind of where we've been in the past. We used to have each caregiver could serve up to 5 patients. And then what would happen is I would essentially, as a patient, designate you as my caregiver, and then you would sort of hold my card and you could grow my plants for me, essentially. What we found is that was problematic in terms of what then do you do for somebody who either is a really high quantity user or low quantity user. Then you have these fluctuations in what a producer is producing, and you don't want that overproduction to get pulled into the illicit market. Nor do you want somebody who, for example, needs a variety of strains or a variety of products because they might have different conditions that they're addressing. You want them to have some ability to go to different producers or different cultivators to access what they need when they need it. Great. So we've moved away from that serving a number of patients to serving having caps on quantity. That's also really helpful for our partners to, if we want transparent regulation, being able to get canopy as opposed to counting costs, what has just been a much better way for our regulators and for our patients to exist.
Great, thank you.
Chair Nakata.
Hi, thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to getting the material from you, just because I have been looking at Maine's statutes and regulations, although I have to admit I've been focused more on their adult use program. But I have recently gone back to take a closer look at their medical program requirements, and I just wondered if you could kind of quickly just confirm for me some of the observations that I've made. So thank you for clarifying the cultivation limits. Do they have a limit on, does the caregivers have a limit on the number of retail stores that they can open, or is that?
One.
It's one. Okay, it is one. And is there a residency requirement to be a caregiver cultivator or?
There was a residency requirement. It has been moving its way through the courts and is in the process of potentially being struck down. So
okay, that was my understanding, because I understand that the adult use program does not have a residency requirement, right? Because of legal legal concerns surrounding that. You did mention, and I just wanted to confirm that I heard correctly, there's no tracking requirement for the production from caregiver cultivation.
They do have to keep logs of all of their transactions and keep records of their transactions, and that can be part of it and is a part of an inspection process. They also have to pay taxes and ensure that, you know, things are tracked in that way. We do not have the same track and trace software requirements and timeline requirements. There was very serious concern when that was attempted to be imposed on the medical market, that it was just not feasible for a lot of our smaller business owners and caregivers to comply with those requirements and software costs. And it did not, and the legislature ultimately decided that was valuable enough for them to impose on the market, and that there were other ways that they could achieve the same oversight.
Okay, and then sorry, I think this is my last question. Testing requirements. I know that, you know, from talking with the regulators about their adult use program, they pretty much have a full spectrum of requirement for testing, but it's my understanding that the medical products actually only require potency testing. So there's no requirement for molds and bacterial contamination, solvents, or that sort of thing. It really is just, I think, just THC and CBD content. Is that correct?
So there is no, right, there's prohibitions against use of pesticides, and but there's no required testing in the same way that there is in the adult use market in Maine. In part, well, there was a couple of things. One was just the cost and availability of testing just was not there here in the state of Maine to be able, again, to prevent a bottleneck from occurring. Again, we really center patient access here and patient needs. There are a lot of medical providers who do test and provide that information to prospective patients and actual patients. And then there's also a lot of patients in Maine, I think, that have the type of relationship with their caregivers. They go on site, they see what's happening. They don't feel the need to have that testing requirement, but that's something that's kind of been an ongoing discussion. And I think there's also been concern that some of the things that were being requested had so much fluctuation that there was concern about the information.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I do actually have one follow-up question. Related to the residency, do you have any kind of a ballpark idea about what percentage of your caregiver cultivators are non-residents? And the only reason I ask that is Hawaii is, you know, that's one of our concerns as well, is because one of the things is looking at our legacy operators and, you know, maintenance of the legacy operators. And so that's the reason why I've been looking at the residency requirements more closely. So I was just curious, you know, since that's going through your court system now, about what proportion of your caregiver cultivators do you think that this is going to affect?
At this point, I'd say it's still the vast majority, you know, our main residents. But we are looking at, you know, and you are all at the stage of your market could be looking at other ways, other categorizations to try to support your legacy market. You know, again, I think the goal here is to try to bring these folks, again, what I say, like, into the light. We know cannabis is being cultivated, grown, sold. You want to bring all those folks into the light, allow them to do what they do well, to provide those products in a transparent, taxed, you know, tracked way to the people that need it.
Okay, understood. Thank you. And I'm sorry it took a while, everybody. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Melnick, very much for your time.
I look forward to
The,
following. Thank you.
Thank you. The next testifier is Dr. Clifton Otto. Dr. Otto, I'm so sorry we're not able to connect with you the previous meeting. I hope we're more successful this time. So we'll wait and see we connect with you now. All right, I've been told we're not connected. Dr. Otto, please proceed when you're ready.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you clearly.
Great. Aloha, Chair, members of the task force. Sorry for the last meeting's difficulties, some very interesting combination of technical difficulties. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to testify today, Dr. Clifton Otto. There were a couple of items that I'm hoping could be discussed by the task force today. The first is this idea of descheduling, which was mentioned twice in the social equity recommendations. I think you have a great opportunity to discuss this today because you do have Administrator Radula with you from NED. And it's an issue that's being talked about a lot nationally because of the recent scheduling review that's going on. But I'm curious what this could look like for Hawaii at the state level. Is descheduling really necessary, or would there be something like a carve out that provides an exemption currently for our medical cannabis patients? The other issue related to that is federal Schedule 1 that are the medical use recommendations touch on kind of tangentially, but don't really get to the heart of the matter, which I think is directly addressing ways that federal Schedule 1 can not be applied to our patients and dispensaries. Of course, we have the recent admission from the White House that federal Schedule 1 is a failed approach to cannabis and needs to change. And I just wanted to remind the task force of the survey, the rapid survey from the medical use working group that pointed out that about 25% of patients and providers are finding negative impacts from federal Schedule 1.
You're fading in and out, Dr. Otto, and you have 30 seconds left. You're fading
Okay,
in and
well,
out.
hopefully my main points got across.
They were. Well, we can no longer hear you. Can you hear us? Dr. Otto, I just wanted to ask the task force if they had any questions based on what you testified to. Have we lost you?
No.
Still there, okay. Task force members, any questions for Dr. Otto?
No, I think I heard, and Dr. Otto and I have discussed this in the past, just this inherent conflict between state and federal law has really made it difficult. You know, I remember as a provider when I first tried to write prescriptions for marijuana, we were worried we were going to lose our DEA license. There's a lot of trepidation. Now, this was in years past, but even though those fears are not as alive as they were before, I think for a lot of people, there's still a concern. But I do agree that the stars may be lining up that state and federal can finally achieve some side of alignment.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ireland. We're not sure whether the technical difficulties are on our end or on the end of the person speaking, but any other questions for Dr. Otto? We still have 4 more testifiers that have indicated they wish to testify. All right, so the next testifier we've heard from already in the earlier agenda item, and that's Alex Wong. Okay. And I've been told we're connected now to Alex Wong.
Hello, Alex Wong, testifying for agenda item number 3, this time the correct agenda item number. Again, I'd like to say mahalo to this body for all the hard work and the honest work put into this task force in terms of social equity. I'd like to reiterate that all of this good work will be in vain if the state of Hawaii licenses a way to mainland cannabis corporations who are trying to set up shop. As I said previously, allowing them to come here and colonize our cannabis market would essentially undermine this push to create a solid grassroots, locally charged economy, and that will benefit the people and the state of Hawaii government and tax coffers. Furthermore, I strongly suggest great prejudice and even prohibition against allowing cannabis companies to import any sort of cannabis products into the state of Florida, as it would be a huge detriment to our market and the price of cannabis in the state of Florida.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you, sir.
Yeah.
All right, any questions for Mr. Wong?
I just have a quick comment, and I appreciate Alex and your comments today and in the past. This is something that we looked into as the market structure committee pretty heavily. You know, there's been a conversation going on for a long time about how we protect Hawaii's industry. Unfortunately, the U.S. Constitution does not allow us to make carve-outs to disallow or prohibit outside entities from coming into Hawaii. And across the cannabis community and around the nation, these laws on restrictions of residency are being challenged in courts and have been struck down. So there isn't really any good mechanism at this point to keep individuals out of this industry that maybe aren't from Hawaii, haven't been born here, or don't reside here. But what the market structure tried to do with talking through some of the recommendations was heavily support the individuals on the kind of the smaller end of the spectrum, individuals who are growing kind of a craft model, is really support them enough with low licensing fees, low requirements, low barriers to entry, so that we have the opportunity to get as most of our local people into the process as possible. So, you know, we're still looking at ways we can support a local industry here. But just to clarify, this is one of the hardest parts of figuring this out now that residency requirements have changed around the nation. And then also looking forward to when there is interstate commerce, you know, Hawaii would absolutely love to export our product to the continent. But when it comes to imports, you know, there are certain things we can do, such as, you know, requiring all products that come into the state to be tested through our labs, things like that, to make sure that they're meeting the standards that we have in our state. But again, it runs into that issue. It's called the Dormant Commerce Clause, where we technically cannot prohibit that. But there are little policy things we can do to ensure that it's safe and we are supporting a local economy.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
A quick question regarding that. Is there a possibility for Hawaii state tariffs on imports should that become the case in the future?
That's a good question. We tried a little bit to touch on that topic. We didn't have enough time to dig into it, but I don't see why not. I don't see, you know, as an import of an agricultural product that, you know, that there shouldn't be an agricultural inspection, so pests aren't coming into our state, all of the things that are required to make sure that if people are importing products, that it lives up to the standards and you know, provides an extra layer of protection for Hawaii. So it's very possible. I personally don't have the answer, but something we can look into.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Wong. The next person who wishes to testify is Peter Fay. So we'll try to connect with Mr. Fay.
Okay.
And I've been told we've connected now. So Mr. Fay, when you're ready, please proceed.
There we go. I think I'm on. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm one of the other neighbors that surround the hemp farm in Kula, Maui. And I just wanted to thank Terry for supporting that 500-foot buffer. Living here, she knows all about our situation, and ensure you all that we understand there's a difference between the hemp farms or the hemp legislation and your pending marijuana recommendations. And in 2020, Act 14, the legislature included the 500-foot buffer in the final hemp bill because they saw the devastation that was done to our neighborhood. And although this isn't going to affect us, cannabis is grown with hemp or marijuana, essentially the same. And so if a 500-foot buffer was proper to protect future Hawaii residents from the damage done by a hemp farm, we think it would be a really good idea to keep a 500-foot buffer between marijuana farms. And so we hope that you remove that recommendation, that get rid of the 500-foot buffer. We like the 500-foot buffer to stay there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. Task force members, any questions for Mr. Fay? I'm seeing none. The next testifier is Mr. Rick Collins. Try to connect with you now, Mr. Collins. All right, I understand we're connected. Mr. Collins, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, task force. My name is Rick Collins. I'm the program director for the Hawaii Public Health Institute. We first just want to commend the task force for working on the plan, and we have some recommendations that we believe from a public health perspective will enhance the plan. The first is with the social equity working group, and that is to identify not an independent entity, but to place the dual use of cannabis under the Department of Health. From a public health perspective, they have the expertise. They also currently have a department, already working in the medical side. So it's likely going to be less expense to taxpayers than creating a new department. And it will also minimize the influence of the cannabis industry and profit motive in setting the policy agenda, which is important when we're looking at protecting our community. The second recommendation we have is for the market structure working group. There are a number of recommendations we have in our, sorry for the feedback, I can hear feedback, but there's a number of recommendations we have in the testimony that we provided. A couple just to say that we recommend health warnings. We recommend things like plain black and white packaging to reduce exposure to and consumption related to youth, as well as other vulnerable populations. We also recommend to limit the number of retail outlets.
30 seconds, Mr. Collins, please.
Thank you. Just to prevent over availability, particularly in low income communities and sensitive areas in the community. And the third kind of recommendations for the public health and safety working group is to expand on the APHA policy statement that you folks use to craft some of that, is to say to prohibit products that appeal to youth, such as candies, candy bars, lollipops, and to prohibit flavored e-juices and vapors. That'll be enough. Thank you, Judge. Thank you,
Mr. Collins.
I'm here to
task force members, any questions for Mr. Collins?
Not necessarily a question, but just a comment regarding the social equity recommendation you guys have around keeping under the Department of Health and not bringing it into a separate entity. I'm not sure if this would address the main concern you have, but I wanted to point out that we did suggest that there's an advisory board in this separate entity that's made up of public health officials and others to kind of make recommendations. One of the biggest recommendations out of our first presentation in this task force from other states, it was pretty prominent that they all encouraged us to have a separate regulatory entity, given the difficulties to work interagency and across, having Department of Health regulate one thing and DOTAX do another and things of that nature. That the ones that have switched over to a recreational market have said that the easiest, the best way to regulate is in that way. So if any other recommendations, if we move forward with that, a separate entity that you would suggest to increase the public health oversight, with certain members on an advisory board, something of that nature, that would help to kind of meet that policy goal of making sure public health is addressed. Very happy to take a look at that and take that in consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, Randy. Thank you for that comment. I don't know if I'm allowed to comment, but I will say we did add that in that working group, is to say that the main thing is to make sure that that group isn't really tokenized, but it has the kind of ability to respond quickly to any public health concerns that may pop up. And what we're trying to basically learn is lessons from, of course, the youth epidemic around vaping. And so how can we kind of create a body where we can respond efficiently and quickly if there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to comment that was something that we very much focused on, and we went working with our regulators here in the state and otherwise they have always said that because this industry is so rapidly changing, they need to be able to work on the fly and not have to, wait 6 months and go through a whole process to increase regulations or decrease. So I appreciate the comment, and definitely something we're working on.
Director Choi, I know you have a question for Mr. Collins.
Mr. Collins, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Collins, the Hawaii Public Health Institute, are they for or against recreational marijuana?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Choi. So we take a neutral stance so we don't take a stance on for or against. We're neutral, but we are essentially advocating for kind of public health regulation and policy if or when it does become recreational.
Mr. Collins, recreational marijuana from a health perspective, is it good for you or bad for you?
I think that's a tough question for me to answer without getting pigeonholed maybe, but to say that we want to follow the science in that what the goal of public health is to do is to make sure that we understand that this isn't an ordinary commodity like shampoo or soap, but that this is a commodity that has social impacts on our community. And so we want to make sure that those protections are upheld should dual use be allowed in our state.
Okay, good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Leverens, you have a question?
Director Choi, I'll just make a medical comment on that. And how are you?
Hi, Jim.
Everything that we consume has a risk and a benefit. And you could argue that alcohol is bad for you, cigarettes are bad for you, a cupcake is bad for you. And I think it's just all relative on what individual freedoms have and the risks they're willing to take for consequences later in life. Marijuana has a unique set of issues, medical issues that can be attributed to what would be considered negative. Hyperemesis syndrome, the effect of the smoke, and other things that we all know about. But at the same time, there are potential medical benefits with respect to pain, and there's a laundry list of those as well. So while Mr. Collins didn't necessarily comment on the good or bad, everything's relative, and that's just my point. And it's just this group's, I think, goal and society in general to kind of lay that all out to whether you make something illegal or not.
Mr. Leverens, you ready to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. And I concur with Dr. Island's statements. And it's very clear looking at levels of preventable illness, injury, and death that alcohol and tobacco are the most harmful illicit products currently on the consumer market. I would also add that 8 decades of cannabis prohibition has needlessly snared many thousands of people into our criminal legal system here in Hawaii, and that the American Public Health Association generally recommends a public health approach to substance use, and that includes the decriminalization of drug possession for personal use. My question to the HPHA here is about its recommendation for the citing of cannabis retail outlets. Would this first, I'm not too familiar with zoning laws here in Hawaii, but do we have similar laws, ordinances and laws relating to businesses and shops that sell liquor and other alcoholic beverages? And I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so we believe that we have the ability to zone those. I don't know of a community that has an outlet density wall now on the books around alcohol or tobacco. But the medical cannabis system does have outlet, and Michelle could speak to these, of 2 per county, I believe is the kind of outlet regulations now, but she could speak more to that. But there are ways to do that. One of our recommendations as well in Public Health and Safety Committee was to allow local governments potentially to allow for stricter policies, that wasn't preempted at the state, should they want to maybe go that route as opposed to others that may not want to.
Mahalo for that. My concern is that we are putting a layer of regulation on cannabis that is clearly more appropriate for alcohol. Thank you.
Chair Nakata.
Hi, and thanks for coming on to testify. I just did want to make a quick comment to your recommendation to expand the recommendations for the Public Health and Safety Working Group. The 2020 APHA policy statement, under that first item, to protect children, youth, and other vulnerable and marginalized populations, does specifically state to carefully regulate product potency, form, and characteristics. And I would say that prohibiting forms of products that may be appealing to youth, as well as the flavoring in vaporized products would fall under that consideration. And then just a really quick comment to Nico's question. I think there's been a couple of studies. I want to say Alaska, Washington State, and possibly Oregon. They have begun to look at retail density and in conjunction with some of the negative public health impacts, things like youth use and youth perception of risk and some of those. And there have been some preliminary associations. So it's primarily focused on the concerns related to I think exposure to kids, being able to view density, as well as having products that are very easily accessible. But I think a lot of those things are still very new. I want to say that particular study is probably the first one that I've seen. And I'd be happy to share with the task force. It was a pretty well done study.
Thank you, Ms. Nakata. Mr. Collins, unless you have something to respond to, we're going to move on to the next testifier. All right. Thanks again, Mr. Collins. The next testifier has just given us their name as Steve. So we're going to try to connect with Steve now.
Okay.
All right, I've been told we've connected with Steve. Steve, are you ready to proceed?
Good afternoon. I've been listening to this for probably 5-year sessions. And certainly the task force has a job at hand. Alicia Mullick today from Maine, I think she summed it up real well, that we can hopefully come out of the dark into the light properly. The prejudices I have seen and watching has been very apparent. And the thing I'm most concerned about, the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii sums it up well with all the government agencies. The lack of housing, the increased cost of everything is really related to overtaxed, over departments. And I believe that we really need to keep this as unregulated as possible. And we know we cannot suppress trade interstate, but help from the organizations and marketing locally allows local growth, local revenue, and no different than solar and energy tax credits, the revenue in the state. So I please ask that the task force remembers that there is a constitution, there are rights, and the caller in about ag land forgets that when you buy ag land, you give up the rights to smell, noise, and other related activities on agricultural land. And so if you don't want to be in that area, then buy it in the town and the cities away from ag land. But ag land was designed specifically for agricultural use. So again,
That's 30 seconds remaining, Steve. Please proceed.
Put a crimp on both revenue or profitability for the people trying to make money, and anybody playing in the agricultural world knows there's not much money in it. So how do we market Hawaii? How do we protect the grower? How do we protect the consumer? Well, generally speaking, private practice takes care of itself, and the more regulation, the more trouble. Thank you very
All
much.
right, and Steve, you've exceeded your time. Thanks very much. Task force members, any questions for what Steve has shared with you? All right, see none. The last testifier is Jutta Mueller. Try to connect with Jutta Mueller now. All right, and I understand we've been connected. Jutta Mueller, if you're ready to testify, now is your time.
Oh, okay.
And we lost her.
No, she's
Nope,
on.
still there.
It's off.
Ms. Mueller, can you hear me? We are ready to hear from you. If not, we're gonna have to move on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Please proceed.
Okay. So I'm one of the members of the neighborhood affected by the hemp cannabis farm, and I have concern about sizing of caregiver operations because that will just be as much nuisance as if it was a commercial operation. So I would like you guys to consider thinking about that too. If you have it 30 feet from a bedroom, if there's any regulations for caregivers, that would be very wise to look into that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Mueller. Task force members, any questions from Ms. Mueller? Seeing none, do we have any phone testifiers? No phone testifiers. Madam Chair, we're now ready to take up agenda item 3, task force member decision-making on which of the working group recommendations to include in the task force final report to the legislature. Task force members, 2 general reminders. 1, you already voted on the task force recommendations, and 2, in an October 24 letter, each of you, Chair Nakata, asked you to be prepared to affirm, recommend edits, or object to recommendation. Chair Nakata further noted that if you object to the recommendation as adopted by the task force members, your objection will be noted. You may submit a rebuttal statement and include it as an addendum to the final report. Ms. Nakata, Chair Nakata, I know you're now going to lead this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Broderick. I've made a decision that I'm going to work backwards through the agenda, because of the volume of recommendations that are under the social equity section. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm hoping that maybe we can move quickly through the shorter ones and then spend the bulk of our time with the social equity working group recommendations. So I'm going to go ahead and start with agenda item 3, D as in dog, which are the public health and safety working group recommendations, of which there were 3. I'm primarily speaking just because I was the chairperson, but I have other task force members that are that were members of that working group, and but just to basically lay them out, the 3 recommendations that our working group made were: number 1, that the state should adopt the recommendations of the 2020 American Public Health Association policy statement, and there were 3 primary areas that the recommendations covered. 1 was to provide protection to children and youth and other vulnerable and marginalized populations through careful regulation of the availability and access to cannabis products, advertising and marketing, product potency, form and characteristics, and packaging and labeling requirements. Number 2, minimize harm to the public through an effective public prevention education program, protection of clean indoor air, prevention of impaired driving, adoption of policies to promote and protect health equity, and investment in public health and safety programs. And then number 3, to monitor patterns of cannabis use and related public health and safety outcomes through population-based surveys, syndromic surveillance, and other data sources. So that was recommendation 1. Recommendation 2 was essentially,
Chair?
yes,
Chair?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you, but could you give us voting instructions? Are we gonna vote on 1, then 2, then 3, or are we just gonna vote on D? How do we vote, and do we vote up, down with reservations? Can you give us voting instructions, please?
Oh, my apologies. Okay, I just jumped in. I would like to propose, just because of the volume of these, that we vote on each of the items as a group. And then we can have discussion on it if there's any concerns about ones that that there is no agreement on, then we can have a discussion on those items only.
So for example, we have 3 items here. If I only object to 1, I should vote no on the entire D.
No, I think you would just raise a concern to have a discussion about your objections to number 1. Okay, but if the task force would like to do the voting in another way, I am perfectly amenable to doing it. If you would like to do it one by one, that's fine with me.
I would prefer to do it D1, D2, D3, and just go up and down. And if there's discussion, there's discussion. If just a straight vote, it's a straight vote. And do we vote up or down and with reservations, or is it a straight up or down vote?
I would say it's just a straight up or down vote.
Okay, and then do we assume just vote the no's, or do we have to vote the yeses too, the approvals too?
I would like to have a complete accounting.
So you're gonna have a roll call for each one?
Yes.
Okie dokie. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any objections with taking the items one at a time?
No objections, but I also have a question. If we would like to make a change or an addendum that currently doesn't exist, how do we handle that?
You can raise it and we can consider it as a group.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments before we pursue? Okay. Hi, Dory. Go ahead.
Hi, Michelle. Just a question. What is being presented? Is that the exact wording that will be presented in the report to the legislature?
So just to clarify, the entire working group reports will be attached to the final report. In the actual language, it has yeah, so I'm sorry. So as it appears in the agenda is the abbreviated language that will go into the final working report. But there's also a note, a comment that the full actual text of the working group report is going to be available.
Okay, so this will be at the beginning of the report.
Yes, correct.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm sorry for diving in. Obviously, I'm trying to make sure that we get everything done. We have a lot to cover today. Okay, so let's consider item D1 then, which is the recommendations that the state adopt the recommendations of the 2020 American Public Health Association policy statements. To
approve.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Motion to approve D1.
Okay. Does anybody second? Thank you. Okay, all those in favor? You may show hands by raising hands. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so I have 11. Do I have any no's? Okay. Okay, so D1 is adopted. Okay, so D2 is basically an extension of the American Public Health Association requirements. It's specifically to ensure that there is a comprehensive surveillance program that monitors cannabis use as well as exposure trends, and risk association among Hawaii's population, basically to quantify adverse events, including but not limited to hospitalizations, emergency department visits, impaired driving, traffic-related fatalities, cannabis dependence disorders and addiction treatment rates, and monitors adverse effects from prolonged cannabis use, in particular, cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, which I think was mentioned earlier today, and other outcomes among patients, such as drug-drug interactions.
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
All those in favor, please show of hands.
Chair, I do have a comment.
Oh, please, go ahead.
I support what the recommendation is offering. However, I'm trying to be consistent across the board about the need for an independent entity that would take over regulate in kind of more a global basis regulation. So I would suggest that the Department of Health not be specifically named in the recommendation, and that a more passive form of the recommendation be adopted, such as there should be established a comprehensive surveillance program.
I think this is going to be super hard to do, to be honest. I mean, on paper, it looks good, but for an ER and a doctors and to have mandatory reporting, to keep track of every person in this state for these things is going to be very difficult. I mean, if it was a little narrower, such as traffic incidents or some of the kind of more major things, I think it would be easier. That's my only concern. I think it's going to be really hard.
Okay, so some of this work is actually currently underway already. We are connecting with the emergency medical services system for the state of Hawaii to obtain information about emergency calls, as well as emergency department presentations, and also admissions to hospitals for ICD. I can't remember if it's 10 or 11 coding that identifies that the presentation or the admission is related to cannabis use and an adverse effect of cannabis. So basically what we've done is we've connected with primarily Colorado, but also Washington and Oregon, and Maryland, who have already doing this type of surveillance and identifying the data sources that they are using to collect this information. And it's our understanding that actually most of these data sets are already in existence. It's primarily just that the program hasn't had the resources until just this past April, where, when we got our epidemiologists and our IT specialists, that we've actually been able to start reaching out and making those connections. So based on the suggestion of Ms. Takeuchi, do you want to just use general language that the state should establish a comprehensive, or the regulatory authority, or those are just some suggestions that I have for broadening the language?
Chair, could I make a suggestion? If we're going to try to wordsmith this by committee, we're going to be here forever. If somebody has reservations, can we just vote reservations and put comments, submit comments to you to be inserted into the report? That'd be easier.
Okay.
If we're going to try to wordsmith by committee, it's going to be like forever. So we go up, down. If we have reservations, we say comments to the journal, and just we can submit our written comments, and we can dispense with all these matters like within minutes. But if we're going to try to wordsmith this by committee, it's going to be like death.
Okay,
I will defer to your extensive experience in conducting these kinds of these processes.
So,
Mr. Choi, Director Choi.
Thank
So
you.
I'm fine with doing that. Does anybody in the group have any
Joanne, is
objections?
that okay with you?
It's fine with me. I'm very flexible.
No, I'm asking Joanne. Joanne, is it okay?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I like that. Because
Okay.
I have a lot of reservations and I hate to vote no just because I have reservations. Yeah.
Yes, you can vote for reservations and put comments to the report, and we can just insert your comments in and
Yeah.
help. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Alrighty, I'm gonna proceed to take a vote now. So all those who vote yes to adopting the language as is, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3,
Ireland is with reservations.
Wait, Jim.
6, 7. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I have 7 yeses.
I have with reservations also.
Wait,
Okay.
call for the vote now. Call for the.
No. So may I have no's, please? Okay, so I have 2 no.
Now call for the reservations.
Okay, and those with reservation. Okay, and I have 1. Okay, so now I have 3 with reservation. So, but the 2 of the 3 that voted with reservations voted no. So I'm,
No,
No, I wasn't a no, I just couldn't hit the lower hand fast enough.
same here.
okay, so I'm missing somebody. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna do roll call. So yeses. I got Terry and I got Randy and Ellen. Is that correct? I got Nikos and I got Director Choi and I have Dory and I have Garrett and I have myself. Oh, okay. My count was off because I didn't count myself. So we have 8 yeses and we have 3 with reservations. And did you wish to comment with regards to what your reservations are?
Yeah,
We'll do that in writing later.
Yes.
I'll submit it.
Okay, sounds good. Alrighty, let's move on to item D3. I promise we'll get quicker as this goes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. I will just go across my screen and just take votes. Let's see.
Call for the ayes.
Okay, all those in favor, aye. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Fine with me.
Call for the
Okay.
noes.
Any no's? Okay, I see no no's. And any with reservation?
Yeah, that'd be me.
Grady, and I see 2 with reservations. Oh, very good. Okay. But overall, the recommendations from the Public Health and Safety Working Group pass. They will be adopted. Alrighty, let us move to the Medical Use Working Group recommendations. Okay, so
Motion to
the
approve
first,
C1.
Second.
okay. So in C1, all those that say yes in support, please raise your hand.
Yes. Oh, I didn't get my.
Actually, wait, I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so I have 9 yeses. And then any no's? I have 1 no. Okay, and I'm actually voting with reservation of this.
Voting no because it appears to be outside the scope of the task force.
Okay, thank you. Okay, C2.
Motion to approve two.
Second.
We're C2, all those, and this is for higher content serving accessibility for medical use patients. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I have 8 yeses. Do we have any no's? Okay, I have 1 no. And do we have any with reservation? 2. Okay, so I have 8 yeses, 1 no, and 2 with reservation. Okay, item C4.
3. 3. Motion to approve 3.
Okay.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're on 3. You're right. C3. Okay, this is to allow medical dispensaries to be authorized to provide delivery services and curbside pickup. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I have 8 yeses. Do I have any no's?
Oh, sorry.
So, I was thinking, Wendy, honestly. That would have been a surprise. Okay, I see 1 no. And do I have any with reservations? I saw 2 no's, sorry. Okay. Let's see. I'm sorry, Garrett, with reservations. Okay. Alrighty, okay. Now we are on C4. This. I'm sorry, did you have something, Director Choi?
Approve.
Second.
Okay. C4, and this is to eliminate the list of qualifying conditions as a requirement for registration for a medical use card. Could I have all those in favor, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9 yeses. Do I have any no's? Terry, got your hand up or down? Okay. Okay, so wait, I'm sorry, Ellen, I saw you have your hand up. Any other no's? Okay, and Joanne, so 2 no's. And do I have any with reservation?
Shouldn't.
Okay. I am miscounting somebody. I'm sorry. There were 2 no's, correct? Okay. Oh, 2 and 9, 11. Okay, we're good. I can't add either. Alrighty, we are going on to C5. Which is to allow medical use patients to retain their rights to cultivate for themselves or designate a caregiver to cultivate.
I'll move.
Second. Okay, we have a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I have 9 yeses. Do I have any no's? Okay, I see 1 no. Okay, and any with reservation? Okay, very good. 1 with reservation. Alrighty, that's 11. Okay. Moving on to C6. Registered medical cannabis patients should remain exempt from taxes that may be levied on the sale of cannabis or cannabis products.
I'll move.
Second,
Thank you. All those that support this, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I have 7 yeses. All those that with no. Okay, I see 3 no's. And do I have any reservations? Okay, I'm miscounting again. Can I have the no's again? Please raise your hand. 1, 2.
Jim,
this is one that didn't vote.
So I have 3 no's. Okay. Yeses, could you please raise your hand again? Just want to make sure I have everybody. 1, 2, 3. Or Terry, you had your hand up, right?
For yes.
Yes. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Process.
Not bad. Okay. We're good, actually. We're down to 10 members right now, so.
Chair. So I think we just adopted C6.
C6, correct.
That's
Sorry.
contrary to the previous recommendations by the tax working group. Which is why I voted against it.
Okay, understood. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay, so we are moving on to C7.
Second,
Okay, and this is to require that these basically the adult use products should be tested, be required to meet the same standards as medical use products. Okay. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, we're unanimous on that one. Thank you. Okay, moving on to C8, which is that medical cannabis retail locations should be required to maintain dedicated inventory for medical use patients and private use space. Private space. Okay.
second,
Alrighty, okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I have 9 yeses. Those voting no, please raise your hand. Okay. Those with reservations, please raise your hand. Okay, so 2 in reservations. Okay. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item C9.
Sure. So I think you.
Is somebody talking? I think it's just background, sorry. C9, which is that all existing medical cannabis licensees, so these are the current dispensary licensees, should be allowed to continue to operate without disruption into the medical, into the adult use program.
I'll move.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I have 7 yeses. Do I have any no's? Please raise your hand. Okay. No. 2 no's, sorry. See Director Choi. And do we have any with reservations?
WR, I think that the licensee would need to still be in compliance with medical cannabis laws or rules to be allowed to continue to operate. So I'm voting WR.
Okay, so we have 2 with reservations. Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, moving on to C10. That current legislation regulations should be reviewed and amended to allow for expanded production and wholesale limits in anticipated of increased demand. Have a motion?
I'll move.
A second.
All right. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor of C10, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I have 5 yeses. Okay, and then do I have no's? Please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3 no's. Sure. Do we have any with reservations? So that makes 3 with reservations. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now we're moving on to the section under patient protections. So under patient protection section, item number 1, stating that legislation should provide employment protections.
I'll move.
Okay. Any seconds?
Second.
Great. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I have 7 yeses. Do I have any no's? I see 1, 2, 3, 3 no's. Okay, any with reservations? 1 with reservations. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 2, under patient protections, legislation should prohibit law enforcement agencies from denying or revoking the right to own firearms.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in support, please raise your hand. 6, 8. Okay, so I have 9 yeses. Do I have any no's? Okay, I have 2 no's. Just making sure, no with reservations. Okay. Alrighty, moving on to item C3. Legislation should permit registered medical use patients to possess medical cannabis and cannabis products for personal use when traveling between counties within the state.
Should approve.
Second.
Okay, all those in support, please raise your hand. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I have 9 yeses. Do I have any no's? Terry, do you have your hand up or down for no?
I'm sorry, I vote in favor. I just didn't put my little hand down fast enough.
That's okay. Yeah, that's why I was checking. Okay, I'm sorry. Could anybody who is voting no, please raise your hand again. So 1, 2,
Is everybody? I'm sorry. Just double checking that this isn't a message that. Okay. Moving on to number 4, under patient protections, legislation should provide patient reimbursement for approved medical cannabis products by state regulated insurers.
Chair, can I make a comment?
Sure.
I took a look at the actual report, and it appears that the report recommendation is that to permit reimbursement, not provide reimbursement. I just wanted to make that note because it is a significant distinction between the recap that we're voting on and the actual report. I'm not a member of this group, so I don't know if anybody from the group can comment.
Okay, if that is the language, that was the language that was in the original report, because I'm the one who summarized the recommendations down to so if the language in the original report for the recommendation is to permit, then I would suggest that I'll make that correction, because that would have been my error.
I would suggest we change this to legislation should permit for patient reimbursement.
Okay, I can make that change. That this, I mean, I'm the one who summarized the language and the recommendations from the.
Yeah, it's a significant difference, that's why. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. You're welcome. Okay, so the revised language is legislation should permit for patient registration reimbursement for approved medical cannabis products by state regulated insurers. I have a motion.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I have 8 yeses. Do we have any no's? Wendy, you can put your hand down. Okay, so I have 1, 2. Okay, I see 2 no's. I'm counting right. Do I have any with reservations?
No, I lost my PDF. I apologize. Could you just tell me that one again? I was trying to follow along.
Sure. The language that we're proposing to adopt is legislation should permit for patient reimbursement for approved medical cannabis products by state regulated insurers.
Chair, I'm looking at the report, and the report states recommend legislation that permits reimbursement for approved medical cannabis products by a Hawaii registered medical cannabis patient by state regulated insurers.
Yeah, I'm no on that. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Just trying to pull up the
Chair, I have it on my screen.
Okay.
Okay, it's short enough. I'm going to just substitute the original language from the task force report for item number 4.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Wait, the vote's been taken already, Chair.
Mhm.
The vote's been taken already.
Oh. You're right.
Good catch, Director Troy.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
You got the count right?
No, I don't. I'm still short one person, and I think the one person that I was short was
Jim.
was Dr. Ireland.
Yeah, I was a no on the reimbursement.
Okay. Let me retake the count then. Okay. So all those in favor, wait, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have 8 yeses. Okay, and then I had the 3 no's from before. Alrighty. Okay, we're good. Thank you.
Chair, I'd like to add another recommendation for consideration by this group. And it would be the state to take action to stop federal Schedule 1 from being applied to Hawaii medical cannabis patients, certifying medical professionals and licensees.
Okay, I'm sorry. Could I ask you to repeat that again? I got a bit of echo when you first started speaking.
The state should take action to stop federal Schedule 1 from being applied to Hawaii's medical cannabis patients, certifying medical professionals and licensees.
Chair, point of order, that particular motion was not on our agenda. If you would prefer, you could add it after all of those. Or you can put it in this section, but I think it'd be difficult for us to vote on something.
Yeah, I concur with Director Troy on that point.
I confess my ignorance to the proper procedures here, but I would like to see this as an option for the task force.
So Terry, after we finish the voting for the entire agenda, and if the chair so permits, you can always add something at the end. But I think we should go through the agenda items first.
Okay, thank you, Director Choi. I'm good with that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to know,
And
'cause I was gonna do the same thing.
Okay,
They can contest that as long as it's not a substantial change, somebody from under the sunshine law.
Say
So
that again?
I just got word that if we're voting on something that's not on the agenda, that could be a sunshine law violation.
Yeah.
Okay, and so Chair, we should go on with the agenda, and we can take Terry's suggestion up at the end of agenda, and the sunshine law experts can weigh in.
yeah, okay. I have sent a message to us as well. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the patient and public health education section. Item 1 states that the Department of Health should develop a robust education campaign aimed at reducing ignorance and stigma surrounding medical use of cannabis for medical professionals, healthcare administrators, and insurance providers.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, to all those that are in support, please raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10 yeses.
I have a question. So I'm in favor of this, but I'd also like to expand it on it and make further recommendations. So do I just submit that as a recommendation at the end? Or vote with reservations so that I can,
I would suggest that you vote with reservations and send your comments. Chair.
okay, then I'll
Yes.
vote. Okay, then I'm voting with reservations.
Okay, so I have 9 yeses. I have 1 with reservation, and I have any no's, sorry, and I have 1 no. Okay. Moving on to item number 2, under patient and public health education, the Department of Health should develop and deploy a public health education campaign about medical cannabis use, safety considerations, and how to identify signs of psychological dependence.
Motion to
move.
approve.
Second,
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 yeses. Do I have any no's? Okay, I have 1 no. Alrighty. Thank you. And this is the last item under medical use. Item 3,
Madam
University of Hawaii.
Madam Chair, I believe it's the intent of our group to eliminate this from the recommendations, and that it's untoward for us to, to determine medical curriculum.
Okay, I think it can be resolved by, I mean, it's, so if you could just maybe explain to the group why the working group was.
Wendy, could you take that, please?
Sure. So after we wrote this, I kind of realized that we really can't determine what the curriculum of the medical programs or the nursing school programs is going to be. And so I was asking to have this removed from our list of recommendations and maybe replace it with another recommendation that I will submit to you for educational programs for the medical community.
So Chair, couldn't we entertain a motion to approve? Then we vote, and if the majority is no, then it's off the recommendation. Right?
Correct, that's what I was going to suggest, that
Motion
we
to
address
approve.
it by voting.
Second,
Okay. All those that, I'm sorry. How did I do that? All those that support item 3 regarding curriculum at the John A. Burns of School of Medicine, please raise your hand. Okay. I see no yeses. Okay. All those that vote no, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so I see 10 no's. Okay, and do I have any with reservation? Okay, and I have 1 with reservation.
My reservation is just that we could mention that we suggest they put it in their curriculum, and that one little word change might give our intent without mandating.
Okay. Okay, with regards to sunshine law requirements for additional recommendations, it is unfortunately not on the agenda, so it's not something that I can ask for at this time. I could put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay, let us move to
Market structure, working group requirements, this is item B on the agenda. There are 6 items, so let's start with item B1, which states that the market structure should not create a standalone industry that requires a large amount of individual oversight. And then goes on to state that the rules that are applicable to the cannabis market.
Motion to approve.
Okay,
Second,
all those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then my screens keep shifting, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have 10 yeses. Do I have any no's? Okay, and any with reservation? Counted wrong. It's 9 yes and 2 with reservation.
Now it's 1. It's now it's 1. Okay. I think Randy forgot to put his hand down.
Okay. So item B2. Licensing structure should be horizontal with a variety of license for all plant touching elements and no limits on how many different types of licenses a licensee may acquire.
Motion to approve.
second,
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. See. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yeses. Do I have any no's? Okay, no no's. Do I have any with reservations? 1, 2. I'm sorry, with reservations, can you raise your hand again? I don't think I caught everybody. 1, 2, 3. Ready. Okay, got it. Okay, moving on to item B3, that homegrown cannabis plants for personal use. Sorry. By those over age 21 should allow to up to 20 plants without a license. We have a motion.
I move.
Any second?
I'll second.
Okay. So all those that are in support of item B3, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3 yeses. Okay. All those who vote no, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4. And all those voting with reservation, please raise your hand. Okay, got it. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item B4. The regulatory agency should be given authority to establish license fees, the number of licenses, and other licensing requirements to prevent the oversupply and undersupply of cannabis in the market.
Motion to
Second.
Okay. All those in support of this provision, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10. All those voting no, please raise your hand.
All those with reservation. Please raise your hand. Okay. One with reservation. Is that correct, Terry?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item B5. The state should establish geographic indicators, appellations, or other forms of intellectual property or branding protection.
Move.
Second.
All those in support of B5, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 yeses. All those who vote no, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 3 noes. Sorry. And all those with reservation. Okay. Moving on to item B6. There should be an independent regulatory body that consists of a smaller oversight board that's supported by a larger advisory board.
I move to accept.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
Thank you. Okay, all those in support of item B6, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 5 yes. All those who vote no. It's not 1, 2, 3 no's. And all those with reservation. 1, 2, 3 with reservation. Okay. Okay, so we're moving on to the last group. I am going to ask that we take a 5-minute break at this point before moving on. So I'll see everybody back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, hi, everybody. Sorry for being late coming back. Okay, so this last section is item 3A, which are the social equity working group recommendations, which are quite extensive. And so the one thing that I wanted to say at the outset to the group is I find that I'm going to have a very difficult time voting to support all of these recommendations as they are written. It's my assessment that the subject of social equity, which I very, very strongly support, is extremely complex. And I think that the time constraint that we had for this current task force was inadequate to do it justice, and also to provide the legislature, in my opinion, an adequate amount of information for them to be able to move forward with anything of substance. So this is just my suggestion for consideration, is to vote the working group recommendations down as a whole, but instead what I can do is I would like to actually make a recommendation that the task force recommendation be to establish another working group or task force to specifically research the subject of social equity related to an adult use cannabis program, or even just the overall cannabis program, including the medical use program, and put that forward, and using this material that was researched and recommended by the social equity working group as the starting point of consideration for that working group. And this is just my suggestion. If we can do that, then I would write that up and put that as an agenda item for the next meeting, which is going to be our last task force meeting for the group's consideration. So I just wanted to raise that for discussion.
I'd like to second the chair's motion to withdraw this particular recommendation and to suggest that we do another task force, which would have more time and will have more information in order to make a good recommendation to the legislature.
I second that motion.
Chair, take the vote.
Okay, all those that are in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I have 6 yes.
7.
So you have 7. Sorry, 1, 2, 3,
7.
4, 5, 6, 7. You're right. I'm sorry. What was brought to my attention is that when people raise their hands, it shifts the screen, and then I people move around on the screen, so I lose count. Okay, all those who vote no, please raise your hand. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, and do I have anybody with reservations? Okay, I have one with reservation. Okay.
Madam Chair,
So-
could I make a comment here?
Sure.
My concern with this is that we understand the timeline that we operated on this year. My concern is that social equity will get dropped entirely in forthcoming deliberations around cannabis without something from this task force or this on the subject. We should at least endeavor to have some guiding principles or something that comes out of this task force on the subject of social equity. I feel very strongly about that. And what we've seen in other jurisdictions is that without adequate provisions for social equity from the legislature and its appointees like this task force, continental corporations are going to move in very quickly, and they have little regard for this. So that's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I would actually like to change my vote to no, and with the same kinds of concerns. But maybe another solution might be we go through and approve or deny each of these recommendations, but with the suggestion that another task force handle carrying what we're giving them.
Okay.
So if I can say something, first of all, so the vote was already taken. I think the chair's motion did pass. She is the chair. But more importantly, as an ex-member of the legislature, I know the recommendations of the entire task force, every recommendation could be put on the cutting room floor. It could, it doesn't mean that because we made a recommendation that they're going to adopt it. Number two, the way this task force was kind of put together, there are so many areas that we didn't talk about: consumer protection, more health benefits. I mean, this particular task force recommendation is not every subject matter on the subject of legalization of marijuana. I think there's a lot more areas that has to be vetted. The last thing is, and Chair, I don't want to criticize you, but I will. Sorry, but I read all the testimonies that came in, and not all the people who sent in testimonies actually orally testified. But we never ever went over those testimonies. A lot of those testimonies were negative testimonies, and they didn't show up. They didn't show up to testify, but we never ever went over them or discussed them. So I think that your recommendation that this particular social equity be put on the side for more detailed study and discussion and debate, I think is a good one. On the subject of social equity, it's such a big subject to think that our legislature would not take this up, regardless of what we say. I don't think it's true. I guarantee you, task force members will be there telling the legislature, hey, make sure that you take up social equity. And I know they'll not ignore it. Thank you, Chair.
I'd like to provide some comment. Yeah. In the conversation, yes, it's just a part of our legalization conversation, but I do feel like it's top priority, up at the top 3 when talking about legalization of what needs to be addressed. As we've seen, across the nation, for those who have been paying attention to the cannabis industry, it is a hot topic that is up at number 1 mostly, and is at the top of the failures of the cannabis industry around the nation, is that we have locked up so many Black and brown people for this, and then in return, the majority of the cannabis industry does not reflect the harms that we have done in this industry. with our policies in this country as a whole. So I'm okay with this with what we voted on, although I voted no, but I would like to offer up that we kind of align with Nico's, just come up with a simple statement from the task force that says something along the lines of, the legislature should consider or shall implement some social equity measures that, go to remediating the harms on the war on drugs. Something pretty simple that I think we all can get behind. And then if there is need to be more research on this, at least providing what has been done in an addendum of sorts, that if lawmakers want to look at it, they can. But in my opinion, it's too important of a topic to leave out of this task force recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Randy. And Ellen, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment in general. I really want to recognize our chair and the Department of Health. I believe that this task force was created, but not provided enough resources and time to really look into these really important issues. And, to rush it at this moment because we have a deadline. Yes, we have a task and we need to complete that task, but in some aspects, I really believe that given the meager resources that Department of Health and our chair was provided, it's a miracle that we're even at this point. And it really is kudos to the members of this task force for putting in their own time, effort, and dollars to get to this point. But I just feel that from the very beginning that this task force and Department of Health was not given enough time, resources to really do a deep dive on all of these really important issues.
Thank you, Ellen. Garrett.
These are really.
Garrett, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
I agree with Randy that it would be good if the task force could release a statement to the effect that he said. I take a fair bit of issue with the idea that this was not appropriately researched. There was both research on the back end, research provided by a variety of external organizations, and as a menu of options, it reflects listening sessions that occurred on nearly every island, self-funded by the members of the committee. So to the extent that some of the wording may not be where you want it to be, or some of the particular recommendations that each of the task force members disagree with, one of my recommendation at the moment is in that statement that Randy has proposed, that rather than saying purely no to the current social equity recommendations, that we reference them as a menu for further research by the legislature, or include, in the creation of whatever social equity provisions in their next bill, rather than a completely separate task force. Thank you.
Randy, do you still have your hand up? Did you have other comments that you wanted to make, or?
Sorry about that. No,
No,
but
that's okay. I do want to
maybe I
make
can,
sure.
maybe
Yeah,
I
go
can
ahead.
comment now about maybe for I know we only have a few meetings left, but to
have
offer
one.
that one meeting left. Okay. Maybe to offer that piece for recommendation that Garrett and I have brought up, if we could agendize that, and we could, I know we can't get together as a group outside of Sunshine Law, but I can kind of come up with some language to offer that we could consider and vote on, and if need be, wordsmith so it's appropriate that everyone is happy at the next meeting.
Okay. Dr. Ireland.
I just wanted to say that I do appreciate the other members' comments and expertise, and it's different people have different expertises, and I appreciate their comments. One of the things that on these close votes that I wish maybe we could have done in retrospect is had a period for discussion beforehand. So we would have the opportunity to perhaps change our vote if we heard from the other members in a perspective that maybe we didn't know as much about. And I also agree with Director Choi that just because we put forth these recommendations, they can, the reader can take them or leave them, or they can do stuff that we didn't recommend. But but I have appreciated the collaboration. And I also want to just note that I do also appreciate the online submitted testimony, and I did read through it all before the meeting, and it was voluminous. But I also took that into consideration in my votes today.
Thank you, Dr. Arlen. And Nikos.
I just wanted to underscore how wonderful your leadership has been on this, Madam Chair, not just for this task force, but on the issue generally. And I would hope that our task force finds a way to honor the work that Randy and Garrett have done on their listening tour. It was quite substantive. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join them on any of the trips to the neighbor islands, but it was really an opportunity where members of this task force, and that PIG in particular, went out into the community and took input and feedback from folks. So if this doesn't fall within the task force's formal recommendations, perhaps, you know, the task force and you, Madam Chair, can consider, you know, an appendix or a separate narrative document accounting for some of the conversations, meaningful conversations that this task force and that PIG had with members of the community, including members, you know, in our rural under-resourced communities. Mahalo.
Terry.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to echo what Ellen said. I think this was much too big of a topic for us to tackle in this brief period of time, especially given that we had COVID roaming around the Hawaiian Islands and a number of other things that may have taken us out. And like Dr. Island, I read the testimony before every task force meeting. In fact, I printed copies and I keep a binder here. So at least, you know, the testimony was absolutely top of mind for me. And I agree that there was quite a bit of testimony that was not in favor, written testimony, I should say, not with the same tone as those who testified either online or in public or by phone. So it definitely reflected differences of opinion. With regard to social equity, the reason I voted yes to your recommendation, Chair, is I agree with you. I don't think there was sufficient time to put together recommendations that are going to provide effective social equity solutions to some of the things that happen here. As you well know, there were a number of people testifying. There were no Native Hawaiians on this task force. I am Native Hawaiian. I've worked with the Native Hawaiian community for quite some time, yet I don't see how this group can make recommendations specifically with regard to Native Hawaiians without working closely or in concert with Native Hawaiian organizations, least of which Office of Hawaiian Affairs, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and others that have resources to identify the problems and maybe have resources to identify potential solutions. So while I appreciate the intent of the social equity recommendations, and it through no fault of theirs, this is much too big of a topic, I believe, at this point, for us to either vote up or down on these recommendations. And I do support sending a statement or principles to the legislature for which they can tackle this topic, maybe with proper resources and a proper timeline. But you know, this is a very, very big part of any kind of change in the existing cannabis laws in the state of Hawaii. And I think they deserve more time and resources than these guys were able to have during this brief period of time. And you know, I do know they did a great job in reaching out to the community, but there's a number of other entities that probably should have been involved in this, but with insufficient time and resources were unable to. So that's why I supported your recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. So I do appreciate everybody's input, and you know, and Garrett and Brandy, I apologize if the way that I worded my statement, you know, came across as being not appreciative of your efforts to reach out, because I was, there were two parts of it, the social equity working group. I was extremely amazed that you guys did the listening sessions. It was far beyond what I had expected, task force members to be capable or, be willing to take on. And I was truly amazed that they were able to do that, that you guys were able to do that. Similarly with the medical use group, I was really happy, that the task force members reached out actually to the medical cannabis program to ask about doing a patient and provider survey, because that was another thing that I, hadn't expected. It was like, it's a great idea, something that we had always wanted to do, but just really didn't have the resources or, something that made it a priority for us to take on. My suggestion, sorry, because I'm getting comments. So my suggestion is, we did vote already, and as of right now, I have 6 yeses, 4 no's, and 1 with reservation. So I want to make sure that the recommendation that I draft, that the task force recommendation be that there be an additional working group or task force convened. I want to make sure that it does capture at least the 3 large buckets of the recommendations that were made by this working group. And so that's what I'm going to suggest. To say is that the language that I'm going to recommend for the task force to consider at the next meeting, which is our final meeting, so we will need to make a decision on that, vote it up or down, is to say that, to explain the complexity, and that at a minimum, the working group that is established should consider or must consider cannabis justice reform, service equity, and equity in the marketplace as the 3 areas that must be considered by the working group. Because I do agree that those things, and the cannabis justice reform is actually something that's of personal interest to me. With regards to the concern that it might get dropped, I don't think that that's likely. It's true that when medical programs were being established across the states, it was not a consideration. But I would say that with adult use legalization, it is a part of every state's consideration in how they are going to implement their programs. So I don't think that there's a risk that it will be something that will be dropped or forgotten. But at least by putting the 3 buckets of areas into our recommendation, we can be assured that at least those 3 areas will be covered.
Sure. Would the social equity working group report be attached to our report?
Oh yeah, all of the working group reports will be attached.
Okay, thank you.
So all of the working group reports will be attached in full. Do we have any other discussion, any other comments or concerns? Oh,
I just
Randy,
wanted
see your hand
to
up.
clarify, if we'll have an opportunity to submit a statement for approval that I can come up with before next meeting to agendize. Just wanted to clarify if that's something we're going to move forward with.
I'm sorry. So you mean the statement for the actual consideration?
Right, for consideration, something that we could all vote on, a simple statement indicating to the legislature that they should consider social equity in any adult use legislation. I guess one of my, they're meeting next year, right? And another task force would take us well beyond that, so.
Yeah, so this is what, when I put the item on the agenda, the reason that we're kind of restricted by the way that the wording and the way that this agenda is constructed is because the agenda item 3 is decision making. So basically we were limited to making a decision about what's in and what's out. And so my suggestion is that when I agendize the item for the next meeting, which should hopefully, I mean, because we're basically going to be approving the final report, I will adjust the wording so that it will allow for more discussion and some, being able to modify the language of what we finally put in as the recommendation of the task force with regards to social equity working group, social equity recommendations.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Just clarification for myself, would it be acceptable for Randy's group to put together a statement that said, these are the 3 major areas that do require much more in-depth research, and to attach the addendum, the research that they did as a backgrounder for whatever this new body will be that will make the final determination. They've done really good work here, and I'd hate to see this work be thrown out. But on the other hand, I just don't feel we've had sufficient time to discuss these issues in the detail that need to be discussed for us to take an up or down vote today. That's my
Okay.
only concern.
So just a couple of things. Actually the working groups were all are considered to be they're no longer in existence once they completed their report out. I think any individual task force member can come prepared to present their thoughts on the items. I see my attorney online now.
Just for sunshine stuff, I think it'd be safer if you guys had suggested language for something like this. You could email it to the staff and we could discuss on what to do with it. So just so the members aren't talking to each other. I don't think, because this is a brand new thing, it's not like a discussion on a vote or anything. It's a discussion on what an agenda item would be. So I don't think there would be an issue with that, but just email it to the staff just to be safe, and we'll coordinate through that. To do that with
And
the,
this goes to Tammy again, Tammy Whitney.
yes, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so these are the individual recommendations that we want on the agenda for next meeting, correct? We're gonna.
Yeah, if you want other agenda items or, I was specifically addressing the social equity. If you want to do a write-up on what you want the suggested task force to study, then that could be helpful. And then I'm not sure where we landed on this social equity working group. But I mean, it sounds like you folks want to essentially vote no on the recommendations with the caveat that you are suggesting language for another task force to study the issue later. But you probably want to just put a motion out there and get an actual vote on that.
I think we already voted on that piece, so we're good to go. That has been adopted.
I thought that got voted down.
We had 6 yes, 4 no's, and 1 with reservation. And we did take a vote on it.
Yeah, so you need 8 yeses?
We only have 11. It's not a majority of.
The task force, the total number.
It's the majority of the total number, so it didn't pass.
Is it something that we can get email votes or reach out to other task force members to vote on, or do they have to be present in this meeting specifically?
You kind of have to do it in live, but I mean, you could have another vote or make another motion.
Okay. So,
Michelle, actually, a lot of the vote, we didn't make the threshold, yeah.
yeah, if that's the case, then a lot of the votes did not.
Just saying, yep. Yeah, but I think it just is what it is at this point.
Okay.
And then just for my benefit, I know I voted no and WR on a number of occasions. I don't feel compelled to annotate the rationale. So I would just as soon not provide additional information that would have to be included in the report if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. It would be your additional comments would be only if you wish to.
Got it.
To provide that.
Thank you.
Okay. So Andrew, what I'm hearing is that we should. It wasn't properly, the vote wasn't properly taken. Or just that it didn't pass.
It was a little unclear what the actual motion, but whatever the vote was, it didn't carry.
Okay, so basically what I had proposed was that I would, well, I had said that I was going to not be able to vote. I would probably be voting down most of this just because I felt that that this subject actually needs more work or more research done. And so that was my proposal, was that in lieu of adopting the working group recommendations, that the task force report reflect that the task force recommendations were to use the working group's recommendations as a basis and starting point for a separate task force or working group on social equity, and that their considerations should specifically include cannabis justice reform and service equity and market equity.
Yeah. I mean, you can have a motion that says that. I would make it a little shorter and just say, you have a motion to not include these cannabis recommendations in the final report, but include a recommendation that you'll vote on later about a form of task force.
I think the issue here is that even if we were to vote on that, will we have 8 folks to do so, right? We need 8 at least for that motion to pass, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
So if it doesn't pass, then you go through the recommendations one by one and see if they pass or fail.
Okay.
And then, you just take it from there, because your agenda item currently is the task force going to adopt the working group recommendations as they're laid out in this agenda into the final. So that's what you're voting.
Director Choi, I see your hand raised.
Okay, so I support the chair's motion, and I want to say that if we were going back to the social equity working group recommendations, a lot of it will not get the requisite 8 votes and it will just die. I wouldn't like to see that. So I would say that we should adopt the chair's recommendation, and that way at least we'll communicate to the legislature that social equity is important, and these are the items that should be mentioned in the report. Should we go through the recommendation one by one and they die, then they become no recommendation, and I don't think that would be a good thing. Thank you.
So point of clarification, are we moving to table the recommendations today, but leave room for the next meeting to have a statement or a articulation of, guiding principles or primary considerations that can be included in the final report of the task force?
Yes, so that's basically what it is the motion is to not adopt the working group recommendations, but at the next meeting to consider alternate recommendations with regards to social equity to be included in the task force final report. Andrew, did I get that right?
I mean, that's, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, if that's the recommendation, I'll second it.
Do we need a motion to take a second vote?
Well, I think what they're saying is they didn't get the requisite 8 votes. So 8 of us would have to say aye to Michelle's recommendation, and I'll second her recommendation that she just made.
Okay, well, let's take a vote then. All those in favor?
So
I'm sorry, Wendy, were you going to say something?
well, I'm just not sure what the alternatives are, going through item by item, and we don't know if they're gonna be struck down or not. That's speculation. I don't know.
Just to clarify, I'm planning to vote yes with reservations, so I won't be voting it down. I think this is a good compromise, without going through it all and eliminating all the work that we've, done and not put that in a report. So I'm happy that if next meeting, we can suggest some other language, attach this as an addendum, say this should be a part of the work.
Okay. Okay. That's
Yeah,
what
I'm with Randy.
me too.
Okay, Chair, take the vote.
Okay, all those voting yes, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, again, we do not have, we have less. So we have 5 yeses. How many no's do we have? Okay, we have enough no's. And with reservation. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There's 6, I think.
Yes, 6. So 6 with reservation.
Yay, good work. Thank you.
Quick point of clarification, are we submitting that like proposed language beforehand, or do we bring it with us to the meeting? And if we submit it beforehand, what's the deadline to do that?
Well, we have to, the agenda will have to be posted 1 week prior. So the last meeting is on the 28th. So the agenda has to be posted on the 21st, and I would, which is a Monday, and I would ask if you could submit it by this Wednesday, just so that, and it would have to go to the medical cannabis program staff, so to Tammy Whitney, just because as a task force member, it cannot come to me. But just to give them time to compile that information.
Thank you.
Okay, Wendy, you have your hand up.
Oh, no, I just
Oh,
didn't.
sorry.
I
Okay,
didn't
Randy,
know.
Randy does though.
Sorry.
Yeah, I've got a question for AG Goff. Just a point of clarification on the sunshine law. So say, Garrett and I want to talk offline about proposing some language, given that that's not more than 2, or we're allowed to do so, even though we're not talking about a vote specifically.
Yeah, and it's a little complicated in these situations because you're kind of discussing what your position would be. Not allowed to really discuss the vote, and that's why it's easier for the staff to kind of be the point of collection.
Got it. So he and I individually can submit without any conferee, submit language, and then you guys can figure it out from there.
Yeah, I think without creating another permitted interaction group, that is the safest way to go with something like this.
Okay, Ellen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, so the votes that were taken, they would need 8 votes in order to pass, right?
Yes.
So can we just, if it's possible, clarify which items passed?
For all the previous ones.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I can do that.
And WR counts as yes, right?
Yes.
And I'm so sorry, I have got to run at the moment for a meeting. Thank you all.
Thanks, Wendy. Okay.
Michelle, can I ask Andrew a question? Andrew. Hello, Andrew.
Yeah.
So we realize now that we needed 8 votes to pass anything. Can we suspend those rules? And just go with majority for the vote that we already taken?
Unfortunately, no, that I think that is a sunshine law in a statute that you have to have an actionable vote. It has to be the majority. If it was just a procedural thing within this, then it would be majority of people that are there.
Okay, so you're saying no?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go quickly through the items just to give you a final vote. So item D, Public Health and Safety Working Group on number 1. The vote was sorry, my notes. Okay, item 1 was 11 yeses, so that passed. Item 2 was 8 yeses and 3 with reservation. So that passed. And item 3 were 9 yeses and 2 with reservation, so that passed. On C, medical use working group recommendations. Medical considerations, number 1, 9 yeses, 1 no, 1 with reservation, so that passed. A higher THC content, number 2 was 8 yeses, 1 no, 2 with reservation. So that passed. Item 3, medical dispensaries should be authorized to provide delivery services and curbside pickup. 8 yeses, 2 no's, 1 with reservation, that passed. Item 4, the state should eliminate list of qualifying conditions. 9 yeses, 2 no's, that passed. Item 5, registered medical use patients should retain their home grow rights. 9 yeses, 1 no, 1 with reservation, that passed. Item 6, registered medical use patients should remain exempt from new taxes. 7 yeses, 3 no's. I'm sorry, 8 yeses, 3 no's. So that passed. Item number 7, cannabis and manufactured products should meet the same requirements as medical use process products. I have 11 yeses, so that passed. Medical cannabis retail locations should be required, number 8, sorry, medical cannabis retail locations should be required to maintain dedicated inventory. I have 9 yeses, no no's, 2 with reservation, so that passed. Number 9, all existing medical cannabis licensees should be allowed to continue to operate without disruption. I have 7 yeses, 2 no's, 2 with reservations, so that passed. Number 10, current legislation regulations should be reviewed and amended to allow for expanded production and wholesale limits. I have 5 yeses, 3 no's, 3 with reservations, so that passed. Actually, with the reservations counting as yeses, I think almost everything passed. Patient protections, number 1, legislation should provide employment protections related to hiring, discipline, and termination. 7 yeses, 3 no's, 1 with reservations, so that passed.
Legislation should prohibit law enforcement agencies from denying or revoking the right to own permitted firearms. I have 9 yeses and 2 noes, so that passed. Legislation should permit, number 3, legislation should permit registered medical use patients to possess medical cannabis when traveling between counties. 9 yeses, 2 noes, so that passed. Number 4, with the revised language reverting to the original language in the task force report. I have 8 yeses, 3 noes, so that passed. Patient education, patient and public health education, item number 1. The Department of Health should develop a robust education campaign. Have 9 yeses, 1 no, 1 with reservation, so that passed. The Department of Health should develop and deploy a public health education about medical cannabis use and safety considerations and how to identify signs of psychological dependence. 10 yeses, 1 no, so that passed. The University of Hawaii curriculum for the John A. Burns School of Medicine. Item number 3, there were no yeses, 10 noes, 1 with reservation, so that did not pass. Into the market use report. No, market structure, sorry, market structure working group recommendations. Number 1, market structure should not create a standalone industry. There were 9 yeses and 2 with reservations, so that passed. Item number 2, the licensing structure should be horizontal with no limits on variety of licenses. 7 yeses. 8 yeses and 3 with reservations, so that passed. Item number 3, homegrown cannabis plants for personal use should allow up to 20 plants without a license. 3 yeses, 5 noes, 3 with reservations, so that did not pass. Item number 4, the regulatory agencies should be given authority to establish license fees, the number of licenses and other licensing requirements. 10 yeses, no noes, 1 with reservations, so that passed. Item number 5, the state should establish geographic indicators, appellations, other forms of intellectual property or branding protections. 7 yeses, 3 noes, 1 with reservations, so that passed. Item 6, there should be an independent regulatory body that consists of smaller oversight board supported by a larger advisory board. 5 yeses, 3 noes, 3 with reservations, so that passed. Okay. I think we're good. And then on the revised recommendation for the social equity working group requirements, we have 5 yeses and 6 with reservations, so it effectively passes, and then we will consider it in our next suggestions for the task force recommendations with regards to social equity at the next meeting. Do I have any questions or comments? Okay. That being said, I think this brings us to the end of our agenda. As I stated earlier, the next meeting will be on November 28th. And our agenda and any other kinds of information in support will be posted on November 21st. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.